I want to thank our audience for joining us today. Today I'm interviewing Nagessa Dube about the political polarization in Ethiopia. So, Nagassa, you've been a peace advocate since I've known you and a part of the political movement that toppled the EPRDF in Ethiopia, a nonviolent movement, but has since seen violence and struggles afterwards. What do you think the reason for this is?
Yeah, so during the between the time between 2015 to 2018, it's not that's not the only time that there were protesters and there were oppositions uprising against the EPRDF or a TPLF-led gov- the government in Ethiopia, but the time between November 12, 2015 to until April 2018 was a time where there is a much movement, a lot of movement taking place in Ethiopia. I mean, the movement was more with the, I mean, it get much attention. It gets people with I mean, a lot of the number of people who involved in the protest get higher, and the movement gets stronger. The uprising get stronger against the, the then government of Ethiopia, and that finally forced the government in power, especially to declare reform, and the prime minister to resign. The former prime minister Haile Mariam Desalegn to resign. Then you know what happened is there were different factions, different groups that were uh, part of the struggle. There are armed groups, there are other groups. I mean, uh, even though the main group is the Oromo youth called the Kero youth, but there are other youth groups that joined this movement. I mean, there were Fano group from Amhara, there were Ejeto from Sidama, there were some other group from Afar, from Somali, and different ethnic group of Ethiopia who joined this movement, and that movement toppled the region. However, the nonviolent movement was successful in removing the people in power, in bringing the change, the regime change, in removing, enforcing the former prime minister to leave power. But it was not able to, different groups who were organized to fight, who were organized to overthrow that government and to come to power. It doesn't lead to a certain group to come to power. So every group that were opposing the former uh, government in power expect itself to replace, and the supporters of those groups expected to come to power. Rather, the thing became what? A reform process. So that means people in who were part of former government came to power. Another section, another group within the system replaced those who were more powerful and continued to rule. I mean, that the reform process, in the reform process, those who came to power, for example, they dismantled EPRDF, the former coalition. They formed a new party called Prosperity Party, and they started to lead the reform or the change. So this disappointed the other group. Actually, the reform process, in the reform process, in the first like 1 year or 1 year and a half, everybody was excited because in the reform, uh, prisoners were freed, and banned political organizations were allowed to come back to Ethiopia and to struggle peacefully. And some draconian laws. Some were removed from terrorist list, even armed groups. They, and that excited a lot of. I mean, there was a hope. So there are two things here. The leaders were hoping to share power, political power. That didn't happen. And they were also, I mean, there were a lot of expectation, within some political group that they would succeed to power. That didn't happen. So the reform process was slow. It doesn't when reform happen, you can't satisfy everybody. You can't satisfy every group. Every group cannot be satisfied by that. So just taking the armed groups, now you see there were 3 armed groups who were fighting in that process. So one of the armed group is there is Ogaden National Liberation Front, which get disarmed and totally, it's no more armed group like in 2018. So that became like it's a peaceful party right now, ONLF. And there was other Gimbot Sabat Arbanyot Gimbar. It's another armed group. That group disarmed its groups. They have a small number of soldiers, maybe less than 1,000. Anyways, they got disarmed and they banned that organization doesn't exist anymore. They joined other groups, and they formed with another name called Izema. So they become political party. But there is an older armed group called Oromo Liberation Front, which is like 40 years old. Started a struggle the same time TPLF and EPLF started. ELF is the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, the party that is leading Eritrea right now, and the Tigray People's Liberation Front that also ruled Ethiopia for the last 27 years. So, but this political group, partially the leaders get back home, though things are not like as they expect. But the partially disarmed, and another group is still fighting. Another faction of the Oromo Liberation Front, now basically called OLA or Oromo Liberation Army, is still fighting. So another major event is the TPLF, which toppled the Darg region, which ruled Ethiopia, which was a dominant party in Ethiopia for the last 27 years. Its leaders were removed from major key positions from the power. And again, some are about to be charged with crime. So this group, they retreated to their base, to the Tigray, and they refused to go in line with the federal government. So they contradicted the government with many issues, like they held election while the federal government postponed election. They held election, and also they have their own armed group, which is like, and they are totally reluctant to the federal government, and they went to war. So that is what complicated the Ethiopian transitional process. I mean, the fact that the TPLF is totally reluctant not to be not to be subservient to the federal government as a state government, acting independent, just like what happened in the United States during Jefferson Davis against Abraham Lincoln. So that similar act happened. So the federal government went to war with the TPLF. So, and again, because most people were not, even from the Oromo side, there are, as I told you, there are a lot of factions. There are very various groups that want to take part in a government or to share power. So the leaders of the reform, they didn't share this power to different groups, but they allow individuals to join this group. Actually, there were some parties which are very close to them, which somehow go in line with them, who subserve, who allied to them. Like, for example, Izema is close to them. OLF was split into group, and some OLF group look like they work allied to this, to the party in power, to the party that lead reform. They share the power to these people. And they conducted election last May, and most other parties like Oromo Federalist Congress, they didn't take part in the election. So that means, so still the government won. The people in power won like landslide. I mean, like they won like 90% of the parliamentary seat and everything. So because other parties, they boycotted election, and then again, people went to armed conflict. On my part, on this, I have this article that I wrote. I have been advising, continuously advising different groups to remain, to stay, to just to keep their non-violent struggle. I am still a peace activist, as you said. I advocate for peace. I usually, it looks like since 2005, when I read a book by Gandhi, Satyagraha, a book written about the non-violent struggle of Gandhi in I read that in Ethiopian prison, because I was in Ethiopian prison between 2004 to 2007. We were detained because we organized a protest in Addis Ababa University, and the then powerful party called the EPRDF, which was led by TPLF, they throw us to prison and charged us as members of Oromo Liberation, OLF, this guerrilla fighter, armed group right now. Still, partially, some part of OLF is still conducting peaceful struggle. Another faction of OLF is still conducting armed struggle. So my advice is the same. I believe that a non-violent movement is more successful in toppling the government. I know that, but this non-violent movement, once you remove a government, it doesn't guarantee that the group, the organized group would come to power. Still, it doesn't guarantee that democracy would come right away. But you have to be consistent, and you have to keep on mobilizing your people and still fighting. Whenever the train go out of the track, you should uprise, you should fight, you should demonstrate. You should be like a well-organized group. You should have a public that has awareness. You need a public which is you should have an educated public. You should have a public that should consistently fight for its rights. Otherwise, if not, it's easy for any group that comes to power to lead the power or the government into like undemocratic rule. And you don't have a guarantee that even the very group that is fighting right now would lead a democracy, the country into democracy. So what happened? What went wrong is we don't have a public that is well aware of the situations, and that can keep on the movement, that can push the button, and we don't have organization that can lead it.
Hmm.
It was. Do you have a follow-up, or Michael? Did I respond to your question?
Yes,
Okay. All right.
very well.
Yeah. So we can. Okay. You can ask me further, or
So
you can,
I
if you don't have a follow-up.
so I read your article about the Guji Oromo, and in that article, you wrote the Guji Oromos need freedom from the liberators, and that victory comes from winning the hearts and minds of the people. I assume the armed violence has affected the Guji Oromos. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, actually, about the this is the one I was talking about. The victory for Oromo will come from winning hearts and minds of the from winning hearts and minds. So in this article, what I tried to address is I actually tried to tried to advocate for nonviolent struggle. Uh, the message of the article is mostly the armed groups they would attack other civilians, maybe who are part of the government, who are so because they would show their power. They would show they want to scare the people. They want the people to be afraid of them, to be afraid of their action, and then then they obey them. That is how the armed group operate in Ethiopia. The armed group, they anybody who criticizes them in a meeting, in a public gathering, who speaks anything bad against them, they would take action against that person. They either kill that person, or they kidnap that person, take him to whatever they do, they torture him, or they do whatever they want against him. So you stop opposing them, or you stop saying anything against them, because for the fear of violence, for the fear of retribution, they either attack your maybe your relatives or whatever. Actually, there were some improvements after I wrote this, because even my own brother have been kidnapped by this group, and they didn't torture him. They didn't do anything. They just released him. But with this, I see some improvements on the on some respects. So, but the very ideology, what I want to criticize here is the very ideology is, you see the supporters of this armed group here and there, even in diaspora, they say they threaten people, like saying, if you critique this armed conflict, oh, you are a government puppet, we'll kill you, wait for me here. I mean, there is a lot of threatening messages I receive every time. Yeah, you are a government. Why, if you support the government, would that be a crime? You can support anybody. You can support any group. I mean, so here you find the public, you find supporters of different groups who are not tolerant of opinion, who are not tolerant of, who does not tolerate, who does not respect the right of opinion, the right of expression. So it means that there is a lot to be done. I mean among the public, among the supporters of different groups. So this is not limited only to, restricted only to uneducated people. You see professors, doctors. So taking their own view is absolute right, absolutely correct, and the views of others is totally crooked, totally wrong, totally against the public. So any action taken against any person who opposes their view is righteous. I mean, so that is the article. the former article you mentioned. However, there is another article you mentioned about the article I wrote about the how Guji Oromo needs freedom from liberators. Here is that article. Let's see. Okay. It's here. So yeah. Okay. Here is that article. So in the article on which I wrote, Guji Oromo need freedom from liberators. On this article, I actually, by the time I write this article, it's 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I went back home. I traveled to Ethiopia. I have seen how, and I see, you see this old man is a traditional leader, he's a community leader. He's like a poet, and also he was a former freedom fighter who fought the dark regime and very well respected elder. So so the community knows this guy was this old man. Mangudo was assassinated by the so-called freedom fighters, the OLA group. So that's what the whole public knows. And actually, so these freedom fighters, the so-called freedom fighters, I mean, this group who are fighting the government, allegedly fighting, they take action against a lot of civilians. But in this article, I also mentioned that the government forces were killing innocent civilians in different conflicts. For example, there was a conflict, people on a motorbike fired at the convoy of the government military forces in a place called, in West Guji, in a place called Finchawa, in a village called Finchawa, where the government forces fought back and then, killed about 20, that is not 20, 13 civilians in that town and wounded more. So the human rights violations was not only from one side, it is also from the government side. And there are occasions where government forces killed a young man who was riding a motorbike, where a motorbike was prohibited. I mean, in some areas where there are these, where there are OLA movements are in like East Guji zone. And there was an occasion where government, after attacked by the OLA, the government forces retaliated on civilians around a place called Dara, like between Harakallo and Wadara, around Bika, place called Bika, where they killed about 4 or 6 people. I mentioned it in this article because that was I had a fresh memory, and so this was also covered by the Amnesty report of Amnesty International, and but why I focus on the guerrilla fighters is, or the armed groups who fight the government is, so the other action, the government's action is a reaction, because this group, they, for example, attack the government forces and then hide in the public. They use human shield, and then the government forces, the reaction from the government forces, they kill civilians. So that doesn't mean the human rights violation is still continued. I mean, it's not like something stopped in those days. It have continued, but the violation is from both sides, from the government forces, at the same time from the armed groups. Both groups violate the rights of civilians. There are extrajudicial killings. Those forces, they kill people who support the government or people who have a government, who are government employee. They either kidnap and take them and then make them pay like 100,000 Ethiopian birr, 50,000. Especially if a person is a rich person, they seek or they request him to pay like a bigger amount of money, maybe 1 million or 500,000, depending on how wealthy the person is, depending on how much he can collect. He can maybe request other people to support him, and he can pay them. So that is those are. I mean, I do write different articles. Like maybe sometimes in 2019, in December 2019, I wrote Ethiopian Politics, Repressive Democratic Fraud. That was my experience of running in election in 2010. I ran representing opposition group. I ran in 2010 Ethiopian general election. So I wrote my experience, how government use a fraud, how he used force to, and how they wreck election, what the process looks like, starting from voters registration, how they prevent you from campaigning, how they then rob your votes. And I mean, I wrote my own experience in those articles. So that is my experience. However, let me share a little more. But currently, because of this guerrilla movement, because of this armed conflict in the region, especially the lowlands of East Guji and West Guji, they are suffering a lot. There is hunger. I can call it starvation. There is a starvation. So because this group attack vehicles on the route, even food aid cannot go to this area. For example, if I take areas like Waradas, Warada means a district, like Gorodola, people are very hungry. We can share some pictures from Gorodola area. People are, there is hunger, there is a lot of starvation. And so one is drought, there is a drought. Number two, there is conflict. So even when there is a drought, people move from one place to another place. People can, in the past, people can assist each other. People can contribute, help each other. People from different areas, from other, for example, people in highland Guji can support people in the lowland. People can do a lot of things. And even sometimes government aid can come to the area. But right now, because of the conflict, people are dying of starvation in areas like Gorodola Orada, Sababoru Oradas, Liban, Gumi El Dallo. There is a lot of starvation taking place. And in West Guji, in areas like so in lowlands like Finchawa, which is called in Soda Warada, Malka Soda Warada, in Dugdadawa Waradas. These are lowlands of Guji. These lowlands, they are adjacent to the Borana area. In Borana, actually, there is no much conflict like it is in Guji. Therefore, the aid is, people are getting aid. Definitely, these people are most of pastoralists. They have animals. Their animals have died because of the drought. Okay, they the animals need water. The animals need something to, their animals need like grass or some other food. Because of lack of food, because of drought, their animals died. So what? They have nothing to live on, okay? Because their animals are dying of hunger, died of hunger because they lost. There are individuals whose animal, like maybe who lost 20, 30 cattle of the drought, or maybe more. Then these individuals, the animals are their livelihood. So if after their animals died, they have no other livelihood to live on. They have to get aid. And because of the conflict, the aid cannot reach these people. So this area need attention. Both here you find there is a let me I am looking for some pictures. Yeah. Here we go. Here we go. Here you find this picture. You see this? This is a water they live on, because water. I mean, there is a dryness all over because of the drought. A pond dried. They are getting like this kind of dirty water in some places. Okay, this place is called Harakalo. It's a Gorodola Warada. People are drinking such kind of water. Look at this. This is a water well where they dry. Look how dirty that is. Look at it. You see? Again, yeah. Look, this woman. What kind of water she is living on. Here are the animals are very. They are dying. I mean, the animals are dying. Even the animals also drink this water. The people. You see, this is how drought affected people are gathered in those areas. These small things are the house they are living in. So in general, all I am saying is right now, the conflict and the people, those all other things like being killed either by the armed guerrilla fighters, or killed by the government is that is not the only problem. I mean, the other problem is here people are dying of starvation. People are not getting aid. So we are facing this kind of problem. Does this make sense? Do you have Michael?
Oh, I was just gonna ask.
Yeah.
Will the government not allow the international community to come in and help these people?
So you see, there are a lot of priorities right now. The world is focusing on Ukraine issue, right? They are like the whole focus is there. Even before Ukraine, even within Ethiopia, there was a conflict in the north part, in Tigray part. That is the only area that gets attention. You know, the whole Tigray is a whole region, like about 6 million people. The whole region, I mean, losing is detached from everything, right? So there was a much war. I mean, bigger conflict there, and a lot of people died, and the whole area, that 6 million people, need food, medicine, and everything, right? This conflict is a little bit less, okay, because the whole area, I mean, the whole area is controlled by another group like TPLF. Called that has more attention. This one, the government is not talking about the problem down here, the problem people have here, actually. But these guerrilla fighters, this group, they control some areas, okay? Some like Kabeles, less than Warada though, but a lot of Kabeles. Kabele is like a ward smaller than city. When I say Warada, it's like a city government, okay? Warada is city. Kabele is something less than part of city. What do you call part of city in the United States? Is it ward 665 something? What do we call a part of city?
A part of the city, a suburb?
Yeah, there is a suburb, but there is downtown, but there are for political reasons.
City, suburb, neighborhood.
It could be a neighborhood. Okay, let's take that like a neighborhood. Okay, there are several neighborhoods on which these groups like have a control. Okay, Um, so vehicles doesn't go to some places, to some villages because of that. And so people has to either move out of that place or die of hunger. Okay, so there has to be some solution. Either there has to be like some negotiation taking place between this area, but people should not die because of the conflict between organized group. I mean, between government and other organized group. Both groups should be responsible, should feel responsibility that people would not die of hunger. Okay, that is my concern. So we're facing a more severe, more worse problem than before because of the hunger and drought. Oh, I interrupted you. You can. I don't know what question you were asking, but I interrupted you. You can continue now.
I was going to ask, why will the government allow international aid to come in to help alleviate the problem? Are they just going to say no to any aid whatsoever and just close their borders?
Yeah, right now they are allowing. I think other area. I mean, for recent information I have is USAID is uh, giving aid in Borana area, which is adjacent to Guji. Probably even the drivers are afraid of the armed insurgents, the armed groups. So otherwise, I think the government allows. But my point is, even the government should make this possible. Should either do some negotiation with them, or both groups need to be responsible to the people. I mean, people should not die of hunger, and the government should pay attention and work with these other aid organizations to reach to these people, and so that these people would get enough aid and survive.
I agree.
Yeah, but I don't have enough information what government is doing in this. But my informants from these people, I have on social media a lot of people who are that people are not getting aid. If they get some, they are not getting enough aid.
So you think the government is taking the stuff and not passing it out, or what do you think they're doing?
So it looks like the government is not prohibiting or banning organizations from supporting the drought affected areas. However, now the maybe these NGOs, now even the NGOs who were over there, they are leaving the area because of this conflict, because the guerrilla fighters can kill drivers, can attack the vehicles, can take the vehicles. All right. So I see here the issue is not presented in depth, as you know, especially in Guji. The situation is very bad. Yeah, I mean, this issue didn't get enough attention on the part of the government. That's my fault. Okay, government didn't pay enough attention to that. And the aid organization, unless their safety is protected, would they face risk to support people? Would a driver allow just go? Because if he heard drivers are kidnapped by insurgents, would a driver go to that way, to that place? No. A driver would say, no, I want to save. I can't go this way. So that's why I'm telling you, both sides, both groups, those who fight the government and the government forces, I mean, both need to be responsible. The government is duty bound to maintain peace and order. whatever way. Either it should negotiate with this group and bring them to the table and disarm them, or he should fight them and maintain the peace of the people, right?
Yes.
So the lion's share belongs to the government.
So the government has to take up responsibility where they need to be responsible in.
Yes, correct.
Well, I have one last question. So Ethiopia is preparing for an inclusive national dialogue. What is your view on this? And do you have any thoughts or recommendations you would like to see incorporated?
Okay. Yeah. Good question. This is I have been advocating for that from the very outset, from the very time this reform, from the time when Ethiopia getting to the reform. So let's see something here. Yeah. Ethiopia is preparing for an inclusive national dialogue, correct? So I really appreciate the initiative to hold inclusive national dialogue, because there are major issues. There are people who oppose the existing constitution. There are people who does not accept the existing constitution. There are people who want to discard the existing constitution. There are people who support the existing constitution. There are a debate on what the national flag would be. I mean, there are people who carry a flag, an old flag of the emperors. Other people does not feel that flag represents them. So the current Ethiopia, there are people who doesn't want the current Ethiopian flag. They reject it because the flag has a star on the middle. Let me show you right here. I think maybe that needs to. All right. Okay. Anyways, let me. I'll share it later. However, there are things very important for a peacemaking, because, as I told you, you can't hold national dialogue while violence is taking place here and there. A violence should end. A war, a conflict with the Tigrayans, with TPLF must end. There has to be some negotiation. There is a conflict with the group such as OLA. These all groups should come to table, and they should end violence, and they have to also take place. So that way, the national dialogue would be inclusive. Okay, but it should not be only held between the groups that is taking place, that are taking part in a peaceful struggle or in non-violent, or who. It should include other groups, such as groups which are armed. Okay, that way it will be inclusive. Secondly, I also recommend implementing a South African model truth and reconciliation process. Okay, this truth and reconciliation process should, I think, once this national dialogue starts, it should be discussed in the national dialogue, and they should form another truth and reconciliation commission, which should lead a truth and reconciliation process in the country, because there is a lot of enmity, there is a lot of contradiction, there is a lot of polarization. There are people who want to secede. There are groups who want to secede from Ethiopia. There are regions which are very much polarized, who doesn't want to continue with Ethiopia. And there are groups that are fighting for secession. There are groups which want a unitary form of Ethiopia, or which means they need Ethiopian identity, who advocate for like a unitary Ethiopia. Okay, so all this group are there in Ethiopian politics, right? Like we can talk about three groups. There are groups who want unitary Ethiopia, who does not allow an ethnic-based federalism. They say we should not advocate about ethnic identity. We should forget. I mean, the country should not be, the federalism should not be ethnic-based. Ethnic-based in a sense, they doesn't want to see this multinational kind of ethnic, multinational federalism. They need a unitary Ethiopian identity. I mean, they want every Ethiopian to call itself Ethiopian, and then doesn't really recognize that there is this one group. We can call that unitary Ethiopianists, or who advocate Ethiopian identity. There is ethnic nationalists who advocate for ethnic-based federalism, the second group. There is a third group who advocate for secessionism. Unitarists, ethnic-based federalists, or multinational federalists, and secessionists. So Ethiopia has all these three groups. So we need a truth reconciliation process. Even when this reform began in 2018, there was this commission was established by Parliament. They didn't do anything. The time their 2 years span lapsed without them doing anything, and that commission is no more existing right now. We need a commission. We need skilled people. Maybe we need assistance from international, maybe UN or other skilled organizations. For example, the group in Minnesota, the Advocates for Human Rights, they have skilled people. They have been participated in Truth and Reconciliation in Liberia. We need such kind of organizations who have skill. I mean, the very traditional way of like reconciling people is not enough. This thing is scientific. It needs, for example, Canada is undergoing Truth and Reconciliation for indigenous people. In United States, there is a movement for reconciliation, and not only reconciliation, repatriation, reparation for blacks and for like indigenous people. So many countries, they undergo, they do this Truth and Reconciliation process, but it's not like we have tradition where people, the elders would reconcile people. That's not enough. It's more than that. It's more than that. It needs research. We need skilled people to take part in this process. I believe we need this Truth and Reconciliation process to take place. So did I answer your question or did I explain well? Do you have a follow-up?
Nope, that was very well said.
Yeah. So on my part, I think I do commend, I do appreciate that the government have this initiative. This is very important. People should discuss on very important national issues. There are a lot of issues on which there is polarization, on which there is contradiction, okay? So stakeholders should sit down, discuss on these issues. They should allow the public to discuss on these issues and get closer. I mean, to resolve this as much as they can. And at least people should agree to, sometimes on some issues they should disagree, but they should bring those issues to public to vote on it, on some of the issues. They should vote on those issues. Everybody should be included in this. And that should determine the fate of the future of the country.
Very well said.
Yep. So unless, if you have a question, yeah, you can continue.
That's all I have.
Okay. All right. So, if that is so, you can wrap up our discussion then. Thank you very much for allowing me for giving me this to be part of this discussion.
Oh, you're welcome. And I want to thank our audience for joining us today. We've been hearing Nagessa Dube and hope to see you next time.
Oh yeah, Michael, I appreciate that you joined me today. I mean, I know you from 2015, right?
Yeah, something
Yeah,
like that.
you've been sometimes attending to some meetings we had, and sometimes you participate in a rally, and you're interested to know about human rights situation in Ethiopia, and interested, and some, as you said, yeah, and last time, uh, uh, and anytime, if we can get back with another session, another discussion on Ethiopian human rights issues, or national dialogue, or any follow-up on maybe we can have a program on a drought issue, or any topic you want to discuss about. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.